After Jack and Audrey Newton from the English Midlands both passed away, a local auction firm was brought in to assess and sell the deceased siblings' belongings in accordance with the terms of their will. Eerily, when the evaluators entered the Newtons' farmhouse in 2015, it was like stepping into another world. Brother and sister Jack and Audrey had lived at Grange Farm, located just outside the village of Woolston on Dunsmore in Warwickshire, England, for over 7 decades. They had moved to the charming farmhouse with their parents in the 1940s and helped them raise cattle and pigs while farming the 115 acres of land that belonged to the property. The German Luftwaffe bombers almost leveled the nearby city of Coventry in World War II. But as we shall see, the Newtons' farmhouse survived intact. As a family, the Newtons rejected many of the comforts of modern life. Instead, they decided to live a simple existence that revolved around their quaint Queen Anne-style farmhouse, their land, and the animals. In some ways, the Newtons' lifestyle appeared to be pretty idyllic. Nevertheless, that peace and quiet was shattered for Jack when he enlisted in the military to do his duty during World War II. While he was away serving with the Royal Air Force, Audrey remained at the family home, the dutiful daughter still helping her mom and dad on the farm, but she also developed a love of music and the arts, thanks to this interesting culture that led Audrey away from writing on Dunsmore with trips into the city. She formed a connection with Coventry Belgrade Theatre, and as a result, Grange Farm hosted many actors down the years. The most famous thespian to cross the threshold was the English singer and actor Michael Crawford, the Phantom of the Opera star who went on to fame and fortune on Broadway. After the war, having done his bit for King and Country, Jack returned to Grange Farm. As the years rolled by, the senior Newtons passed away, but the devoted siblings continued with their modest lives. Neither of them ever married, and as well as rejecting spouses and children, they appeared to have said no to almost all modern innovations. It seemed that they preferred the house the way it was when they moved in. Jack and Audrey sold the farm's animals, but they continued to work the land just as they had always done. Sadly, in 2011, Audrey eventually passed away, having reached her 80s. 4 years later, in March of 2015, Jack died at the age of 90. So, for the first time since the 1940s, Grange Farm was unoccupied. There were no close relatives of the Newtons to inherit the property. The contents of Jack and Audrey's will remain confidential, but the executors were about to do something radical in order to settle with the beneficiaries. The estate's executors decided to sell Grange Farm and auction off its contents, and this is where things got interesting. Local property agents Hopkins and Harrison stepped in to organize the sale of real estate and everything in it. However, the experts had little idea of what they were getting themselves into. Indeed, when the auction valuers from Hopkins and Harrison entered Grange Farm, they found it was like entering a time machine. At first glance, it seemed that the family had not altered one thing in the house since they moved in 70 years before. Furniture and fittings, ornaments, and everyday items. Everything seemed to lend a fascinating insight into family life in the 1940s. Furthermore, many of the Newtons' former possessions were even older still. Antiques of all kinds were found throughout the substantial. The 9-bedroom property held some decorative and some purely functional items. Indeed, the Newtons had left behind things they used right up until the end, including a traditional larder in place of a modern refrigerator, wrought iron bed frames, a typewriter, and an old sewing machine. Other items reflected the hobbies and passions of the siblings. Among the astonishing artifacts was a range of old instruments, records, and sheet music, some dating from the 1920s. The auction firm also found archaic film cameras and old pairs of binoculars. One of the more bizarre contents was an amputation kit from the war. Patrick, who helped organize the auction for the executors of the Newtons' will, was astonished by Grange Farm and everything in it. The house contents have not been touched since their late parents' time, he told the Coventry Telegraph newspaper in 2015. A fascinated Patrick added, "It's a time warp of interesting ideas, curiosities, and even war memorabilia." Nevertheless, he was mindful of Grange Farm's former occupants. Although the Newtons never married, they had an interesting life. "It's really the end of a bygone era," he said. In addition, the Newtons' neighbor, Shane Morris, spoke to UK tabloid The Daily Mail when its reporter traveled to writing on Dunsmore to see for himself. Morris explained that the siblings were of the make-do and mend generation. Jack and Audrey had grown up in the Depression era, survived the privations of World War II, and then experienced the austerity of the post-war years, and all this had evidently rubbed off, Morris said. "It's an old person's house, but they never threw anything away. Even before recycling came in, they were very conscientious people and kept everything. Jack was in the RAF during the war, and he was a master of all trades. He did a lot. They had cattle and pigs, and as they got older, they sold the animals off, but they still farmed the land. Prior to the grand sell-off of Grange Farm's contents, Hawkins and Harrison held an open house. This allowed members of the public to learn about the Newtons' lifestyle and view the auction lots ahead of time. According to a representative from the firm, throwing the doors open proved incredibly popular. Apparently, awestruck visitors traveled from far and wide to wonder at the museum pieces. The Newtons' possessions went up for sale at an auction held at Grange Farm in June of 2015. Given the historical and antique interest and value of some of the lots, the event attracted hundreds of people. Many of the attendees were no doubt hoping to claim a piece of history for themselves. Among their numbers was riding on Dunsmore resident Morris, who hoped to get his hands on something to remember the Newtons by. They were very private people, but they were very nice and caring to their friends. They stuck by you. They were like parents to me and my wife, and we might bid on a few items to keep as mementos. In the end, all 500 lots were swiftly snapped up at the auction. Among the items was a gold pocket watch that fetched an impressive €600 or $840. It was a really good day with a great crowd. Sean Barron of Hawkins and Harrison told the Coventry Telegraph after overseeing the event to sell off the Newtons' lifetime possessions. Grange Farm itself went on the market for nearly $900,000. Though Jack and Audrey may be gone, leaving no heirs, their legacy lives on through the many auction buyers. The winners of those fascinating objects must have silently thanked the Newtons for their remarkable preservation of the past.